If peace is on the table, who keeps flipping it over? In the theater of global diplomacy, ceasefire negotiations are often delicate dances between political will and humanitarian urgency. This week, that balance is once again tilting under the weight of competing narratives and entrenched positions, particularly in the Gaza Strip, where the road to deal remains perilously blocked. Despite a coordinated effort by major Western stakeholders, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, to negotiate a path towards ceasefire and humanitarian relief, Hamas' continued rigidity has become a growing point of concern among international mediators. Officials from Washington to Doha cite repeated instances where viable proposals were either dismissed, delayed, or countered with preconditions that shift responsibility away from Gaza's de facto rulers. Now, in a climate where innocent lives hang in the balance and hostage families live in suspended agony, what does it mean when one party refuses to even turn to the table unless its demands are prioritized first? Diplomatic overtures, particularly from the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has framed Hamas obstructionism not simply as a negotiation tactic, but as a fundamental blockade to peace itself. All while Israel faces escalating scrutiny over its military operations. Yet, amid the war fatigue, donor fatigue, and political fatigue shaping global headlines, the silence of compromise remains the loudest sound echoing across the region. Now, as we delve into the details, these and many more will be explored into this flash news. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Tabitha Akor. Let's begin. On the news today, and taking your attention over to Israel, David Lammy has called for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Let's take a listen.
We have sanctioned Israel. Let's be clear, we have got no free trade discussions going on with Israel. We have sanctioned Israeli ministers. Yesterday, when we came together with foreign ministers, we said that we would act further. What we want to see is a ceasefire. It's my expectation that we will see a ceasefire take place. This war must come to an end. I'm very, very clear about that, and so are our other foreign ministers. When I look at the children who are being killed, waiting for food, when I think about a population as densely populated as Gaza is, now held within a 15% of the country, the most densely populated area on the planet, all of this is egregious. We have asked the Israeli government to think again. We've told them that their aid system isn't working. We've told them to stop prosecuting this war and this conflict. And we're absolutely crystal clear now that this war must come to an end. We must see a ceasefire, and there must now be an agreement.
The United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, held separate calls on Monday, firmly aligning with UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who has just made this statement calling for a ceasefire, and also French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot in urging renewed ceasefire efforts and humanitarian corridors into Gaza. Now, despite growing international outrage over famine-like conditions and reports that Israel has begun permitting limited aid via merchant deliveries, Hamas continues to rebuff the United States-mediated proposals, insisting on addressing broader humanitarian needs before resuming talks. Now let's take a listen.
The two-state solution is very simple, and I think everyone can understand what we mean by that. The only way to bring peace and stability back in this region is to have two states, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine, living side by side in peace and in security. This perspective is now threatened, and it's why the dynamic that we have initiated was so important, and this is why the conference that will take place in New York is such an important milestone. We share the short-term objective: immediate ceasefire, liberation of all hostages of Hamas that needs to be disarmed. We share the long-term objective: peace and stability in the region. And what we're doing by bringing the Palestinian Authority leader to recognize 7th of October as a terrorist attack, by calling the Hamas for the disarmament of Hamas and the liberation of hostages, by committing to deep reform of the Palestinian Authority, and by committing to elections within 1 year, by bringing the Arab countries for the first time to condemn Hamas and call for its disarmament, we are creating or recreating the conditions for this political solution that, again, is the only path forward.
Away from the minister's perspective and over to Israel's vantage, these developments have dual purposes. First, framing Hamas as the intransigent barrier strengthens the credibility of ongoing military pressure. Second, leveraging allied diplomacy softens Israel's international posture while reinforcing the narrative that Western states share its burden of responsibility for civilians' well-being. The United States all-or-nothing hostage exchange proposal under development by envoy Steve Witkoff signals a strategic shift. Piecemeal agreements are no longer politically viable in Washington's current calculus. The implication here is Israel gains diplomatic cover, while the Western alliance tightens its messaging, but public fatigue over rising Palestinian casualties threatens to shift political pressure onto Netanyahu and his coalition. Now let's talk about Netanyahu's occupation. As of August 5th, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has formally scheduled a meeting of his security cabinet to decide on the full military occupation of Gaza, the fourth such escalation since Israel's 2005 disengagement. Israeli media portrayed the move as Netanyahu reversing disengagement policies amid stalling hostage negotiations. What's the aim? Dismantle Hamas' hold on the enclave and force the release of approximately 50 hostages in Israeli custody. However, the plan is sharply contested within the military. IDF leadership has warned that a full occupation risks mass casualties, hostage fatalities, and sustained diplomatic backlash, factors that could destabilize Israel's long-term security ethos. Some right-wing cabinet members have allegedly told the chief of staff to resign if he opposes the order, reinforcing a political dynamic that sidelines professional military judgment. Also, a formal occupation would reshape Gaza's governance, undermine regional diplomacy, and intensify international condemnation. Now, domestically, Netanyahu risks alienating his own security establishment and potentially fracturing his fragile coalition amid growing protest movements pushing for a hostage deal. Now, still on Gaza and the hostages, following the Doha collapse, Israel's security cabinet is weighing options ranging from expanded targeted strikes to permanent occupation. Government sources indicate a shift toward territorial consolidation, including potential establishment of settlement and military administration in captured areas. The cabinet may vote to extend operations into central Gaza zones, some of which still house Israeli hostages, an escalation that military leaders fear could result in unintended hostage death. Meanwhile, we see that the war has already claimed over 60,000 Palestinian lives and displaced most of Gaza's population, provoking international outcry. In response to escalating famine, humanitarian groups and the UN experts have accused Israel of enabling a starvation campaign, despite limited reopening of aid corridors for merchant deliveries. And militarily, the operations could cripple Hamas, but at immense human cost and political risks. Now, diplomatically, Israel risks further alienation, especially as European nations threaten to recognize Palestinian statehood if no ceasefire is achieved soon. Now, politically, Netanyahu's stance may consolidate right-wing support, but this enchants moderate and intensify domestic protests demanding hostage release and peace talks. Now, away from that, taking you over to the Middle East, still in the Middle East, with President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has announced on August 4th that Ukrainian forces in northeastern Kharkiv are contending not only with Russian regulars, but a wave of foreign fighters from China, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and multiple African nations. According to ground reports from Vovchansk, Ukrainian commanders confirmed the presence of these machineries on the front lines. Zelensky vowed a forceful response, framing the conflict as a broader proxy war that internationalized Moscow's military strategy. By exposing the scale of foreign recruitment, Ukraine is reshaping global optics. This war is no longer bilateral, but a multipolar confrontation. For Western intelligence sharing and Israel's own defense alliances, the escalation challenges existing threat assessment. The involvement of Chinese forces, denied by Beijing, intensifies scrutiny of China's role beyond economic expansion, while also bolstering Ukrainian appeals for wider international military support. That's that for Zelensky. Now moving over to the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, the UK Civil Aviation Authority has granted Skyrora the first ever vertical launch license to a British company, enabling up to 16 suborbital Skylark L flights annually from Sazavord spaceport in the Shetland Islands. While the license alone marks a milestone, operational readiness is held back by infrastructure limitations. Actual launches may not take place until early 2026, and Skyrora is exploring international partnerships to also accelerate deployment. Britain, or more precisely Scotland, is taking a claim in the sovereign launch economy, breaking centuries of reliance on foreign space agencies. The move parallels Israel's rising space tech ventures and its own reflectors in defense and surveillance satellites. As global space becomes increasingly militarized, the UK entry recalibrates Western alliance calculus, inviting deeper cooperation among allies with indigenous launch capabilities. Now in China, Hong Kong authorities escalated the transnational enforcement of its national security law on August 4th, revoking passports for 12 of 16 overseas-based activists connected to the so-called Hong Kong parliament, and banning any financial or property dealings with them, all under penalty of up to 7 years in prison. The activists, now dispersed across the US, UK, Canada, Germany, Australia, Thailand, and Taiwan, are accused of subversion efforts against Beijing, a long-arm legal apparatus stretching beyond Hong Kong itself. This aggressive posture cements Beijing's confidence in extraterritorial authority and sends a chilling message to global diasporas. The crackdown raises red flags for democratic governments offering asylum or platforms to dissidents, forcing them to weigh their diplomatic posture against accusations of harboring security fugitives. Israel, observing the tactical use of legal frameworks to silence dissent abroad, will consider parallels in managing diaspora opposition and international legal diplomacy. We see that today's headlines move across borders, from the front lines of Gaza and Ukraine to the distant Shetland launch pads and Hong Kong's legal battlegrounds, painting a world where diplomacy is increasingly tested by force, ambition, and ideology. So if both sides claim to want peace, who benefits from from prolonging the war. Until next time, this is where we'll be drawing the curtain on today's Flash News. Remember, we're bringing you untold stories and Undaunted at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Until then, do have a pleasant day and stay safe.